The competitive singles Pokemon community is known for being pretty ban-happy. Usually if something is really powerful, over-centralizing and putting a strain on a metagame, it just gets banned. Many players dislike this about competitive singles, as it makes metagames tumultuous and unpredictable. But have there ever been examples of the opposite thing happening? A Pokemon that is really powerful, with the metagame centering around it, that never ends up getting banned, despite perhaps a large chunk of the community wanting it to be banned. Well, yes, there have been many instances of this, in fact. Some even theorize that a few of these Pokemon are involved in some underhanded dealings and corruption. Is Gholdengo using his enormous fortune to pay off the Smogon moderators and turn a blind eye to his heinous crimes against the metagame? Many believe so, and this is a theory that stretches back further than you could ever even imagine. Let's take a look at some examples of Pokemon that perhaps should be banned but never were. First, we have one of the most long-standing and infamous examples of an incredibly dominant Pokemon that was never banned, and that is the infamous Gen 5 Latios. In Generation 5, Latios is the #1 Pokemon in the game by quite a significant margin, I think. This is a Pokemon that can fit on absolutely any kind of team, no matter the pace, no matter the archetype, no matter the kind of weather, it doesn't matter. You can throw Latios on any team and it will have success. And I'm sure it's easy to see why. This incredible Dragon Psychic type exists in a world before the Fairy type was brought to the franchise, and therefore that incredibly powerful Stab Draco Meteor is one of the strongest attacks in the entire game, especially pre-nerf with its enormous 140 power. This is the crux of Latios' power, but it has more to offer than that, with options like Surf, fitting well in a metagame where Tyranitar is your most common switch-in, and also Rain is often present, boosting the power of this move further. Trick is also an incredible tool to cripple would-be switch-ins like a Blissey or Chansey, ruining them by giving them a useless choice item. Choice Specs and Choice Scarf Latios are extraordinarily common in this metagame, for very straightforward reasons. Latios is incredibly fast, bulky, and offensively threatening, and the ability to levitate enhances it even further, granting immunity to ground and the damage from spikes. By all usual logic, this sounds like the kind of Pokemon that should be banned. It is literally on just about every team, and it can fit on almost any team with zero downside really. It is incredibly offensively potent, and some sort of answer to this is absolutely imperative. And the answers to it aren't even 100% solid. Tyranitar is the most common, as with its special defense boost in the sand and the ability to trap Latios with Pursuit, it is often a pretty fantastic response, but a Choice Specs Latios can 2-hit KO Tyranitar with Surf pretty easily, so that's a way through. Even Draco Meteor brings Tyranitar incredibly low, and Tyranitar is not a Pokemon that can heal reliably. In fact, sometimes the purpose of Latios is to force in the Tyranitar and chip it down, enabling other powerful Psychic-type sweepers that would have otherwise been dealt with by Tyranitar, like Alakazam and Reuniclus. This is an archetype called Psychic Spam. Tyranitar is not the only response to Latios. There is also Ferrothorn, who can stomach Dragon-type attacks with its resistance. But even Ferrothorn is getting pretty overwhelmed by the sheer power of Draco Meteor, and the ignorance with which you can click it. Other Steel types like Defensive Jirachi and Scizor are also seen in the metagame, but once again, are they that solid against Latios? These aren't reliable checks, they get chipped down, they also aren't exactly the kind of thing you see on absolutely every team. They're not universal or anything. So why isn't Latios banned? Well, it's complicated. Despite the brokenness of Latios, for many years the metagame is centered around it, and players are sort of just used to that. You could maybe compare Latios to something like Generation 2 Snorlax, who is also on almost every team and is by far the most powerful thing in the metagame, but I think there are some differences. Snorlax at least has significant set variety, and at least it's slow, meaning it's not immediately overwhelmingly powerful. Snorlax can also be defensively answered by quite a lot of different Pokemon. So Latios, I would argue, is more of a straightforwardly broken thing than Snorlax, since it's fast and this Draco Meteor is such a powerful option that even the counterplay to it doesn't feel that solid. Latios has a bit of set variety. Most commonly you're going to see Choice Scarf or Choice Specs, but there is also Colba Berry, which allows you to live a pursuit. You have options like Recover and Roar on bulkier sets and Calm Mind as well. And you can run things like White Herb or Life Orb if you prefer different offensive options. White Herb lets you Draco Meteor twice, how novel, but every Latios set pretty much is going to run Draco Meteor. They're mostly similar. It's not set variety in the same way that like Gen 3 Tyranitar or Gen 2 Snorlax have set variety. Latios is primarily a special attacker that's fast and clicks Draco Meteor, no matter what set you're running on it. But there is some truth to the fact that if Latios did get banned, the format might crumble immediately. Because Latios is performing some pretty important defensive jobs. Latios is able to pretty well switch into Keldeo and turn the tables against it, as Keldeo is yet another incredibly powerful dominant force in the metagame that unchecked would also perhaps be broken and ban-worthy. But Latios crucially resists both of its stab types, water and fighting, and is faster than it, forcing it out directly. Latios is also a line of defense against Thundurus-Therian, thanks to its electric resistance and high speed. Even that, though, is not the most solid thing ever because of the high paralysis chance on the move Thunder in rain. But this weird defensive role Latios is playing is sort of allowing these other potentially broken things to exist in the metagame without being overwhelming because of the ever-presence of Latios and how that makes their impact feel less prevalent. But many people argue that this is an unhealthy metagame dynamic. People describe this as broken checks broken. Yes, Latios is broken, but it is a response to other broken things that would be too powerful otherwise. Players like BKC have argued that, well, maybe that means they deserve to be banned as well. If Keldeo and Thundurus-Therian are only held together by the presence of Latios, who is itself kind of a problem, then maybe they should all be banned. It's difficult to argue with that logic, but, you know, some players want to preserve the identity of Gen 5 OU. They are just used to Latios being there and the dynamics around Latios that have propped up. Yes, Latios is usually trading up. It's the most valuable piece on the team in most games, but that's just something that players have adjusted to over the years. I don't know, folks. I think this will continue to be a divisive issue for many years to come. By all accounts, Latios is ticking a lot of the boxes that other banned Pokemon have. And, you know, Latios, by extension, is lumped in with the other broken things that it is a response to. Keldeo is extremely close to being an unhealthily dominant force in itself, with its incredibly powerful secret sword being able to hit the enemy's defense stat, turning it into a mixed attacker without even needing to run any physical attack. Secret sword crucially destroys Blissey, who is otherwise a very reliable special wall. And then there's Thundurus-Therian, who is absurdly powerful in a metagame where permanent rain exists. The guy has Volt Absorb for electric immunity, an enormous 145 special attack, and perfectly accurate Thunder to abuse, and many ways to enhance its offensive potential. Substitute is a common one to gain free turns against enemies like Ferrothorn and other more passive foes. There's even Nasty Plot and Agility sets for boosting up. And simply running Hidden Power and Focus Blast is very good complementary coverage. Often your plan against Thundurus-Therian is just hoping that you dodge the Focus Blast and you can KO it back. Not the most reliable thing in the world. But Latios checks it, so I guess that's okay. Even though a common line that happens is that Latios comes in on the Thunder, gets paralyzed, and then Thundurus-Therian runs away with the game. The presence of Pokemon like this in Gen 5 OU's metagame is certainly unique and pretty different to the approach more modern metagames take to balance and banning things. If Gen 5 was a modern gen, I think that all these guys would have been banned by now. maybe this is a testament to how the ethos of Smogon has changed over time, and although tiering action is performed in Gen 5, like with the ban of Cloyster fairly recently, as well as the ban of gem items, there's still a sense that people do not want to tarnish the identity of the generation too much. They'd rather maintain these broken and centralizing things instead of balancing these generations the way modern games are balanced, and resulting in a metagame that looks pretty different to what you imagine Gen 5 OU should look like. Whether you agree or disagree with this philosophy, I suppose, is up to you. And perhaps one day Latios will end up getting banned. And there's one more controversial Gen 5 Pokemon that I feel is worth bringing up here. Because Reuniclus has been a bit of a hot button issue. Reuniclus was recently the victim of a suspect test, meaning the public could vote on whether Reuniclus got banned or not. And they voted against it in a controversial series of events that some people believe was a mistake. Reuniclus is extraordinarily powerful in the Gen 5 OU metagame. It is a mono-psychic type. Today, this is not a great typing, but I think in the Gen 5 metagame, Psychic is at an uncharacteristic high. Reuniclus has the incredible ability Magic Guard, one of the top tier abilities in all of Pokemon, granting a complete immunity to indirect damage. This means Reuniclus is a great fit on sand teams as it completely ignores the Sandstorm chip damage. The Pokemon also has pretty damn good stats for a Magic Guard Pokemon, with impressive 110 HP, 125 special attack, and decent enough defenses. This is certainly a step above Pokemon like Clefable, who were previously the best Magic Guard option. Reuniclus also happens to have access to Calm Mind, meaning it is a Pokemon that can ramp up and become very difficult to stop if given enough setup opportunity. If you invest your EVs fully into HP and defense and just ramp up with Calm Mind boosts, you very quickly become indestructible. And Magic Guard just makes you that much more consistent at doing this, since Toxic will not stop you, Burn will not stop you, you are immune to all that. Even Leech Seed will not stop you. It is difficult to run Pokemon with Roar and other phasing effects in Gen 5, as they feel a bit slow-paced for the metagame. A lot of top threats are not even set-up sweepers. So a lot of teams do not even have a way to actually deal with Reuniclus. In the short term, they might be able to offensively threaten it, force it out, but it is this looming threat that always has the ability to Calm Mind up and just snowball out of control. Tyranitar is, of course, a pretty persistent line of defense with its Choppleberry to stomach a Focus Blast and the threat of Crunch and Pursuit, but that is not solid. As I mentioned with Latios, Tyranitar can easily be chipped down and eliminated, whereas Reuniclus has longevity and is able to stick around for a long time. Reuniclus also has variety. This Calm Mind set is probably the most popular and well-known, but there's also more aggressive Reuniclus sets with Life Orb. You are completely immune to the Life Orb recoil damage, so that's no problem. There's also Trick Room Reuniclus, used to invert the speed stat, making Reuniclus move first, and this can be a win condition on certain teams. Reuniclus is kind of similar to Latios, as it shares the same things that check Latios. So Tyranitar is an answer. Those steel types like Scizor and Jirachi are answers, but one of the best archetypes in Gen 5 is Psychic Spam, running so many of these Pokemon checked by the same things that you simply outnumber them. You can brute force your way through the Tyranitar and eliminate the Scizor, eliminate the Jirachi, and eventually just overpower them with these powerful Psychic types. Alakazam is another one. Reuniclus did not end up getting banned. I suppose the community likes it. It is also sort of tied to Gen 5's identity. It's at the peak of its power in this generation. It's a little bit of an iconic Pokemon. It's just another example of the divide in this community, the difference in attitudes as to what should be done regarding game balance. You could compare Reuniclus to some of the setup sweepers in Gen 9, like a Spathra maybe. Not quite that overwhelming, but in the Gen 5 world, similarly difficult to respond to. But Gen 5 is not the only metagame that was divisive. Did anyone play back in the Gen 7 days? Because I recall this being a similarly divisive and chaotic metagame when it was current. Gen 7 introduced the Z moves to the game, powerful, one-time use, huge attacks that require you to hold a Z stone, but can serve to enhance boost sweepers by letting them get crucial KOs they otherwise would not be able to get. And perhaps the chief abuser of this mechanic, and a general powerhouse of the Gen 7 metagame, was Kartana. Kartana is one of the Ultra Beasts, and it is a standout one of the Ultra Beasts with it absolutely absurd stats. Kartana has a monstrous 181 base attack. This is higher than Mega Rayquaza. Kartana has a higher attack stat than Mega Rayquaza, Zacian Crown, and Deoxys attack. Funnily enough, the only Pokemon to outdo Kartana are some Mega Evolutions. Mega Heracross and Mega Mewtwo X have higher attack, but Kartana doesn't even require a Mega Stone to exist, making it pretty unbelievable. And although Kartana does have a drawback to make up for this, it is extraordinarily frail on the special side with only 31 special defense. I think this is a pretty manageable drawback considering that Kartana also has an enormous 131 physical defense, so the guy is not frail on the physical side at all. In fact, it's a pretty fantastic defensive switch-in to things. And then on defensive switch-ins, it can pose a significant threat with its above average 109 speed. A grass steel typing is good defensively. I mean, remember Ferrothorn? Kartana can sort of serve the same purpose. Has a very high base defense, some solid resistances, entry points. And the icing on the cake is the ability Beast Boost, which will grant a stat boost to your highest stat on KO, and usually your highest stat is going to be your attack. It should come as no surprise to learn that Kartana was an incredibly central force of Gen 7 OU, as one of the most frightening snowball win conditions in the game. Choice Scarf Kartana was a clear way to go with this, as the combination of enhanced speed and that Beast Boost could let Kartana clean up games easily. But I think Kartana was most famous for its abuse of Z moves to potentially destroy the few things that could check Kartana. Z moves are perfect on this Pokemon because while holding a Z Stone, it is bluffing a Choice Scarf at the same time. The Z Stone does not reveal itself in any way unless you come in on knockoff. So the enemy has to respect the fact that you could have a Choice Scarf, giving you an incredible opportunity to set up a Swords Dance. And as Kartana invites in defensive answers to it, like physically defensive Zapdos, Volcarona, and Celesteela, many possible Z moves can power through these Pokemon. Normalium Z, with Giga Impact, is able to just one-hit KO Zapdos outright after a Swords Dance boost. And then you get a Beast Boost on top of that. This is also true of Volcarona. And crucially, this move does not make physical contact, meaning you are safe from the effects of Static and Flame Body. Against Celesteela, you may need to chip it a little bit more with Stealth Rock, but a Fightium Z is also able to power through this very well, dealing a pretty massive chunk of its HP. Steel-type Z moves can also be used, alongside the move Smart Strike for massive stab damage and more unexpected KOs. Kartana does have some semi-reliable defensive answers that are not insanely difficult to run or justify using, and its special frailty does give the enemies some sort of target point to deal with it, but I always felt that the presence of Kartana in Gen 7 OU was claustrophobic. There are so many different sets that you have to respect, and the ability for this Pokemon to ramp up and become unstoppable, if you just guess the set wrong, if it has the correct Z move for the scenario, was incredibly frightening and difficult to deal with. And I think that if the council had the same ethos that they have these days around banning Pokemon, Kartana might have been banned early on in Gen 7's lifespan. Because this sort of ticks all the boxes that similar Pokemon tick in Gen 9. You could compare Kartana to overwhelming threats of Gen 9 OU like Roaring Moon or Baxcalibur or a Spathra, I think. It demands a response. It has this incredibly overwhelming amount of attack, and if you guess wrong, you could just lose on the spot. The metagame has been forced to adapt to it, as it is a legal Pokemon to this day in Gen 7, but perhaps there's an alternate universe where Kartana was banned. By all accounts, this is a pretty overwhelming Pokemon, and it is central to the format to this day. And believe me, Gen 7 is a meta with more than one central threat that is a little bit over the line in terms of power level. There are probably more I could talk about in this video, to be honest, but the one I recall the most from when Gen 7 was current besides Kartana was Greninja, specifically Battle Bond Greninja. This was a new ability introduced for Greninja, an alternative to Protean, and after KOing a Pokemon, Greninja would transform into the incredibly powerful Ash Greninja, who has significantly increased stats. The offensive stats and speed of Ash Greninja are unbelievable, with 145 attack, 153 special attack, and 132 speed. These are box legendary level stats. And Water Dark typing is also pretty fantastic, both offensively and defensively. Ash Greninja made rain teams incredibly common, with allies like Pelipper and Thundurus-Therian and Ferrothorn, and Ash Greninja served as the team's chief breaker. All you needed was one KO, which is pretty easy to come by if you have Hydro Pump in the rain. And after getting that KO, you absolutely go to the moon, and Ash Greninja is incredibly difficult to switch in against. Once this guy evolves to Ash Greninja, even resistances are getting pretty overwhelmed by the rain-boosted Hydro Pump. Even something like Ferrothorn is getting pretty destroyed. And if these stats and this breaking power weren't good enough, they also gave Ash Greninja a multi-hit priority special attack, which is kind of unheard of. Priority special attacks are very scarce, and they're usually not stat boosted, and they are certainly usually not multi-hit, but Ash Greninja has the move Water Shuriken, which starts out as a 15 power move that hits 2 to 5 times, but when Greninja evolves into Ash Greninja, it gets a boost from 15 to 20 base power, and it always hits exactly 3 times, significantly increasing the consistency of the move. So even Pokemon that outrun Ash Greninja are threatened by that incredibly powerful Water Shuriken, including Kartana, who actually, I think, takes almost lethal damage from a rain-boosted Water Shuriken with a choice specs. The counterplay is so limited to Ash Greninja. There was Assault Vest Magearna as a common response, but that could easily get overwhelmed by the sheer power of the water damage. It at least comes in very well on the Dark Pulse, your other stab option, but it's far from reliable. Prone to getting chipped down, and not even that foolproof necessarily. This seems like a textbook bannable Pokemon in many instances, in my opinion, with the sheer power of what it's able to do, as well as the kind of one-dimensional nature of it. There's very little set variety. Some players like to run spikes as a way to make a little bit of progress on defensive switch-ins if they exist. Maybe the enemy has a Chansey or some hard special wall that actually does stop Ash Greninja. Then you can make spikes on that switch-in. There's Ice Beam, if you want that for coverage, but 90% of these sets are just going to run choice specs and click water moves in the rain, and that's about it. It reminds me of something like Chi-Yu in modern gens, who would click fire moves in the sun and just do so much damage that even resistances can't beat you. I see very little difference with this, to be honest. Chi-Yu is a bit more powerful, of course, but I honestly don't think Greninja Ash is that far off, and in many ways it's better with the typing and the access to priority and the speed as well. It's incredibly high speed, but what are you gonna do? Ash Greninja is just a part of Gen 7's metagame. If it were to be banned, it should have happened a long time ago, and I think at this point they're stuck with it. And that's a shame. Maybe some people like it. Maybe I'm overrating how hard it is to answer. But I do think that if you look at this through the modern tiering lens, this probably would have been a point of contention, and at least suspected or something. And the final guy I'll talk about from the Gen 7 metagame is a Pokemon that in later generations is banned, and that is Magearna. Magearna debuted in Gen 7 as the only gen where it is legal to use. In Gen 8, this is an Uber's ranked Pokemon, and so it is in Gen 9. But in Gen 7, Magearna was free to roam the Earth, and a lot of people think this shouldn't be the case. Magearna is an incredibly powerful Pokemon. It has the elite Steel Fairy typing, which is, so far, I think the best typing we've seen in the franchise. with such incredible defensive application, resistances to crucial types like Dark, Bug, immunity to Poison, immunity to Dragon, and even neutrality to Fighting, which Steel is usually weak to. Very easy to cover with teammates. Magearna is elite defensively. Its stats are incredibly well-rounded, especially its massive 130 special attack. And Magearna is diverse. It can be a defensive Pokemon, or an offensive Pokemon, or something in between. And of course it even has the ability Soul Heart, which is amazing, granting a special attack boost if the enemy Pokemon faints. That could be by an attack from you, or just by Toxic or Spike or whatever. If they faint at all, you get a special attack boost. Now, Magearna is allowed to exist partially because of sort of a Latios situation, where Magearna is a line of defense against a lot of other almost broken things in the format. One of them being Ash Greninja, as Assault Vest Magearna is fairly okay against it. Like I said, it has its problems, but it's pretty solid compared to many other things. And Magearna is helping you against the incredibly powerful and central Tapu Lele, who is borderline worth talking about in this list, but I suppose I'll spare Tapu Lele this time. Magearna is extraordinarily good against Tapu Lele because of the typing. You resist Psychic, you are neutral to Fighting, which is the only possible coverage, besides like HP Fire, which you can shrug off, and you resist Fairy too, plus you threaten them directly. The Tapu Lele is another Pokemon that can kind of just spam its stab moves and break through things, but Magearna stops Tapu Lele in its tracks. And Tapu Lele is commonly paired with Mega Alakazam, who benefits from the Psychic Terrain and the priority immunity. Magearna also checks Mega Alakazam in much the same way, resisting its psychic damage and shrugging off its usual coverage. But I think this is certainly another broken checks broken situation, because Magearna is not just this Assault Vest special wall. Magearna can also be a Calm Mind threat with Fairy MZ for a massive Floor Cannon nuke, and then you ramp up with Soul Heart, you heal with Pain Split, and you are just indestructible almost. It's an incredible win condition. Magearna also has Shift Gear, allowing it to be a boost sweeper in a more direct fashion than even with Calm Mind, boosting your speed and relying on Soul Heart for special attack ramping, and much like Kartana, you can just Z-move to one-hit KO would-be checks and then get your Soul Heart boosts ramping the hell up immediately. Floor Cannon is also such a good signature move because it's very similar to Draco Meteor, but it's Fairy type. A high power 130 attack that lowers special attack by 2, but often you're boosting so much with Soul Heart that you can tank the -2 special attack. Like maybe you've gotten a KO with Focus Blast, something comes in, you Floor Cannon, then you gain a special attack boost and lose 2, you're back to neutral. So it's almost like, what if Latios could just cancel out its Draco Meteor downside? What if it could just also gain special attack every time it KOs something? It sort of feels like that. I mean, this is not even fully explaining all the depths of Magearna's moveset variety, because it has so many possible coverage moves it can use, different Z moves it could possibly have. Sometimes it runs Electrium Z or Icium Z, Therium Z, Phytinium Z. It's another case of guessing the Z move, guessing the set even. It's more diverse than Kartana, because it could be defensive, it could be offensive, it could be Calm Mind, bulky win condition, direct offensive win condition. There's a reason it's banned in Gen 8 and Gen 9, and a lot of people think, hey, why the hell is this not also banned in Gen 7? The guy is absurd. In fact, in Gen 7 Ubers, Magearna is also extremely common, even though it's an OU Pokemon. It's a line of defense against Xerneas and Yveltal. Yeah, Xerneas and Yveltal can't even break through Magearna. I mean, goodness gracious, we're allowing this guy in OU? It is the truth, though, that it is keeping other things checkable and legal, much like Latios does, but the question is, should we even allow those guys either? Perhaps not. I will admit I'm not 100% well-versed in Gen 7 compared to Gen 5. I've actually played a lot of Gen 5. Gen 7, I have a bit of a knowledge gap on, despite playing it when it was current, but I have heard people debate about Magearna before, and I do think it's not too much of a stretch to call this a broken checks broken sort of scenario that is comparable to the Gen 5 dynamic, where something overwhelming itself is allowed to exist, partially because it adds some stability in other areas. And now we can talk about Gen 9. Yes, Gen 9 is the current gen, but boy is this a divisive generation, and there sure are some Pokemon that a lot of people think should have been banned a long time ago. Even though there's already been 31 bans in this damn generation, people still think more should happen. And one of the most divisive and controversial Pokemon that has ever been released, a little bit of a mascot of my channel too, is of course Gholdengo. An absolutely elite new Pokemon in Gen 9. Gholdengo has a family fortune providing him with a significant advantage in life. Some say that he has used this family fortune to lobby against the pro-ban movement. I cannot speak on that. I don't know if that's correct. I don't know if that's true. But I do know that Gholdengo is as good as gold. This guy has the ability good as gold. Maybe the best Pokemon ability ever conceived. You are completely immune to status moves in their entirety. All of them. And I think a lot of people forget that status moves do not just include Thunder Wave, Will-O-Wisp, etc. They include just about every non-attack effect. Gholdengo is immune to Defog. Gholdengo is immune to Trick. Gholdengo is immune to Encore. And other such effects. Gholdengo is immune to most things ever. And it makes Gholdengo incredibly difficult to deal with. It certainly doesn't help that on top of this elite ability, Gholdengo is a Steel Ghost type, a pretty tremendous type combination that we've seen be excellent in the past on Aegislash. Gholdengo is probably a better Pokemon overall than Aegislash, thanks to the sheer excellence of this ability. And its elite move pool as well. Gholdengo has Recovery, Nasty Plot for boosting, Make It Rain, a pretty excellent signature Steel type special attack with 120 power, and only a -1 special attack debuff. It's a little bit better than Draco Meteor, plus it's perfectly accurate, unlike Draco Meteor. Gholdengo has coverage, the form of options like Thunderbolt, Dazzling Gleam, it has Thunderwave Hex combo. And it is a central Pokemon in Gen 9 since the beginning, because of its ability to block Defog primarily. That's the real incredible thing about Gholdengo, is that it is able to keep hazards on the enemy side of the field better than any Pokemon has ever been able to. So hazard stacking is an incredible strategy in Gen 9 because of the existence of Gholdengo. Gholdengo is able to block Defog from Corviknight and other Defoggers. Plus it can block Rapid Spin since it's a Ghost type. It can also block Mortal Spin from Glimmora. So pairing Gholdengo with Pokemon like Hisui and Samurott or Ting-Lu and just stacking hazards, blocking their hazard removal, just overwhelming them with hazard damage and powerful threats has been such an incredible archetype through Gen 9's lifespan. And what is really insane is that Gholdengo is so incredible beyond just this role. It's not like it's a one-trick pony that's just a defog blocker. It blocks so many things. You can't even Thunder Wave the thing. You can't cripple it by normal means. You can't even trick against it. Or Encore. It can be an overwhelming special threat itself with Nasty Plot and Terastallization and Thunder Wave and Hex. Some sets run Covert Cloak to even prevent Scald Burns and other effects like Nuzzle, attacks that status, which do affect Gholdengo, but not if it's running the Cloak. Choice Scarf Gholdengo is also just a straightforward offensive direction you can go with it. Air Balloon is common to help in the Great Tusk 1v1 and the Ting-Lu 1v1 and other such things. It's no denying that Gholdengo is absurdly central, and it defines the metagame. It defines the pace of the metagame, the way that hazards interact, which is a fundamental singles mechanic. Some players think, defogging is hard enough in this gen. They've cut the amount of Pokemon with defog. People are running Galarian Weezing specifically because it's like the only thing in the game that can defog against Gholdengo. It has been a common opinion since the beginning that Gholdengo should go. He should go somewhere else. I think this is a fair argument in some ways, but I also understand that Gholdengo is not a Pokemon that demands an immediate response in the same way that a lot of these other Pokemon do. Yes, Gholdengo does have Nasty Plot, but it is slow, it is vulnerable to common enemies like Great Tusk that outrun it and threaten it directly. Gholdengo can be lured in and caught off guard, and the fact that its stats are not that incredible besides its special attack is a point of weakness that can be exploited. Although Gholdengo is incredibly central with its ability to block hazards, this is actually a dynamic I kind of like. It reminds me of old gen spin blocking. I like the push and pull of trying to eliminate their spin blocker to maintain my hazards rather than just having the free defog. In modern gens, you could argue that having a free defog is important for balance, but I personally don't mind it, and I think it feels familiar to me, and it's a fun dynamic. In my experience, Gholdengo is something you can respond to fairly easily with common things, and something that isn't that unreasonable to deal with yourself either. It's good at blocking defog, but there are simple ways to get one over on Gholdengo, like just clicking U-turn with Corviknight, for example, pops their balloon if they have one, and now Great Tusk is threatening to either rapid spin or just kill you, so that's a simple one. Gholdengo is under fire from a lot of common stuff in the format, giving it, in my opinion, more reasonable counterplay than many of the Pokemon I've talked about so far. Now, some of you might accuse me of being paid off by big Gholdengo to say all these things, and to that I have no comment, but I can speak to Gholdengo's character, and I think that I've met the man. He's a good guy. I think he's honest and hardworking, and he means what he says. He's got a can-do attitude and all that kind of thing, so I would say to stop being mean to Gholdengo. He looks like a cheese stringer. That is funny. He's made of solid gold. And even if they wanted to ban him, I think they couldn't, because he's probably immune to being banned thanks to his ability good as gold. Who's to say banning a Pokemon is not a status move in itself of sorts that Gholdengo could easily just block? I think Gholdengo might have a bit more power and influence than even Finchinator. So you can try to ban him if you want, but you might have a rude awakening ahead of you. Now, it's Gen 9, there's like 10 other Pokemon I could talk about here. You know, Ogerpon, Wellsprick, Zamazenta, whatever. I'm going to talk about Kingambit, because I'm pretty sure at this point, this guy is not going to get banned. He's survived long enough, he's survived to this point, and he's cemented himself as kind of the center, the offensive center of Gen 9. But a lot of people are of the opinion that keeping this guy legal for this long was a big mistake. Kingambit is the most powerful offensive Pokemon in Gen 9 by quite a lot. New evolution for Bisharp with a stat increase, a significant stat increase. 135 attack, 120 defense, and off the back of a Dark Steel typing, that is rather outstanding, isn't it? The Kingambit has the ridiculous new ability Supreme Overlord, which grants a flat 10% power boost to all of your attacks for each of your fainted allies. So if your whole team is dead, Kingambit has a 50% power boost to all its damage. That is a crazy power boost, and one of the most classic Gen 9 moments of all time is, you know, you're winning the whole game, you KO their whole team, they send in the last Pokemon Kingambit, and you just get destroyed. Because the guy has Sucker Punch for priority, and Swords Dance to boost itself up further, and other good stat moves. The simple Kingambit with Sucker Punch is able to solo entire teams, and traditional ways to deal with boost sweepers like this don't really work. Unaware does not ignore Supreme Overlord boosts, so with the help of Terra Dark, you can even power through Dondozo, who is supposed to be the hard counter to physical attackers. Even Kingambit can power through that. Kingambit has famously made games come down to 50-50s all the time. They could Sucker Punch and you could predict them, but what if they don't? The ability for Kingambit to solo entire teams on its own is unlike anything I have ever seen, I think, in all of competitive history. There have been comeback mechanics, but not like this. So, why hasn't it been banned? Well, good question. I think that there were more pressing Pokemon than this to deal with in the past, like Chi-Yu, Chiampao, Espathra, etc. There's just always something a bit more broken than Kingambit. And Kingambit has always been kind of an answer to other broken things. It's a common theme of this video. The broken checks broken theorem, you could call it. Where Kingambit is able to beat them with priority and, like, stomach their hits and deal with them. As a comeback mechanic and as a, you know, anti-offense guy with its priority, it is sort of keeping the metagame stable. In a world that's so chaotic, Kingambit is a bit of an arbiter of some semblance of order, despite being a little bit overwhelming itself. It has that in common with Gen 7 Magearna and Gen 5 Latios, I suppose. Plus, the metagame has adapted around Kingambit quite a lot. There is stuff you can do to enhance your odds against Swords Dance and Sucker Punch. Encore has been incredibly popular. It's generally a good utility move, and it destroys Kingambit because if they Swords Dance or Sucker Punch, you just have the easy Encore to punish that, forcing them to repeat. Quite a few Pokemon can get Encore, giving them some reason to exist, like Mousehold being one of my favorites. There's also Zamazenta existing in the metagame, which got unbanned partially to provide a bit of support against Kingambit. Should we unban legendaries so that they match up against the broken thing? That's another debate, but it did happen, and it sort of helped. And there's also Pokemon using Substitute to play around Sucker Punch mind games, and other Kingambit checks that have propped up. I don't know. Yes, it's one-dimensional. It's got a lot in common with like a Gen 5 Latios. It's mostly just running Swords Dance, Sucker Punch, Iron Head. You can run like Low Kick to hit enemy Kingambits. You can run different items, different Terra types. But it's mostly doing just this. It's just clicking Sucker Punch and Swords Dance and clicking moves. But I guess if a metagame is formed around that at this point, it's maybe too late to stop it. I don't know. If you get rid of Kingambit now, you have to sort of build everything up from the ground again. Kingambit is the king. And this is what we've done. We've made Kingambit the king, and perhaps we have to live with the consequences. And to be fair to the council, it's volunteer work. If they ban Kingambit, I think that they would have to ban maybe 20 more Pokemon after that, potentially. Who knows what could happen if Kingambit goes down. So that's a lot more work for them. They're already doing a lot for free, so I suppose in that sense that's something to consider. Probably not the best argument to keep something legal, but it is something to think about. As you've probably learned from this video, sometimes the decision of whether to ban something or not is divisive. Not everyone agrees unanimously. Sometimes they do. Everyone agreed that Dracovish was broken. Everyone agreed that Chi-Yu was broken. But in cases like even recently Gouging Fire, I think that was a close vote. Some people like Gouging Fire. They think banning it was a mistake. And the opposite is true too. Sometimes people think that something should have been banned when it wasn't. I believe Kingambit was suspected in the past and it didn't come up positive. There's discussion to this day around Latios. I don't know what the Gen 7 community is debating about, but I'm sure there's much to discuss there as well. Maybe the perfect decision isn't always made, but I suppose we live with the decisions that we have committed to. And sometimes decisions have to be made early, or the problems evolve to the point where you can no longer stop them without causing more problems. Isn't this true to life? What do you think about all of these instances of Pokemon that perhaps should be banned by Smogon's usual logic, but haven't been? Do you agree or disagree with these decisions? Let me know down below in the comments, and thank you for watching.